Senate will come to order. Those not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise for led in prayer by Dr. Darrell Cummings of the Bethlehem Apostolic Temple in Wheeling, West Virginia. Please remain standing after the prayer as the senator from Jefferson leads us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor.
Dear God, we live in a world that is in a hurry for everything, including decisions. It's also a world that is increasingly quarrelsome and full of conflict. You have called these leaders, their staff, to be decision makers. And sometimes when they are faced with the most difficult decisions, I'm sure that they may feel at times like running away and hiding. But with your help, you will guide them to make the right decision that will benefit our entire state of West Virginia. We know you have called this special group of men and women to stand in your place as fair-minded adjudicators of order. Thank you for the example of your son who taught us to be deliberate in our search for not just an answer, but the right answer. We pause in a moment of quietness to ask your spirit to rest upon them. Give them courage to rise to the challenge and not be overwhelmed by the tasks which they face even today. In you, O God, we can claim the opportunity to be a beacon of light in a world of darkness. Thank you for hearing our prayer. God bless these senators. God bless this state. God bless the USA. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Doctor. Senator from Jefferson.
Will the guests in the gallery and the members please join me in pledging the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Reading the journal.
West Virginia Legislature, Senate Journal, February 20th, 2023. The Senate met at 11 a.m. Senator Blair, Mr. President,
Senator from Monongalia requests unanimous consent to further reading the journals dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading the journals dispensed with and the journals approved. Introduction of guest. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome the honorary pages for the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As guest is the senior senator from the 8th, Alexander Vula, Grayson Riley Roche, Christian Carr, Parker Skeens, and Riley Morgan. As guest is the junior senator from the 17th, Zachary Smith and Trevor Strobel. Will the Senate please make them feel welcome? Are there further introductions? Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is your honor and mine to introduce our doctors of the day. With us in the rear of the chamber, we have with us Dr. Stephanie Benson, Dr. Jonathan Williamson, and Dr. Joshua Moore, all from Morgantown, West Virginia. If you guys wouldn't mind standing, let Senate give you a warm welcome.
Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. In your South Gallery, the senior senator from the 10th and I draw your attention to Sergeant Travis Weber and Corporal Brandon McCormick of the Greenbrier County Sheriff's Department. May the Senate make them welcome.
Further introductions. Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seated in the President's Gallery, we have Eric Ramsey with us. Eric, please stand. Eric is the Executive Director of the West Virginia Southern Baptist Convention. Senate, please join me and make him welcome.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. For members, it's also Recovery Advocacy Day here at the Capitol. And so I'd like to say just a few words for these folks because I don't know how many are here. I know some that are, but it's important for us to know that what these guys do day in and day out to identify and advocate in areas of interest related to recovery, prevention, and treatment, primarily on substance use disorders, is so vitally important. And oftentimes with very minimal funding or due. These guys work tirelessly to try to help with the scourge that has really afflicted West Virginia. This year, the event's co-sponsored by the West Virginia chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, the West Virginia Behavioral Health Care Providers Association, and the West Virginia Alliance for Recovery Residencies, as well as the West Virginia Certification Board for Addiction and Prevention Professionals. You know, these peers have lived the experience in recovery. They are professional social workers, counselors, prevention specialists, all with experience in operating sober living residencies, residential treatment centers, and reentry programs. They're all here today, I think several in the galleries, to advocate and educate legislators on the topics of the day. They're well trained, they're well educated, and a properly licensed and certified workforce is a critical component for any success in overcoming the addiction crisis that we're facing here in West Virginia. I would like to introduce three of these individuals. One is Dick Daugherty. He's with the Kanawha Fellowship Home, if you wouldn't mind standing. Former Senator Mark Drennan with the West Virginia Behavioral Health Care Providers Association, as well as Joe Deegan with W Medicine here at Thomas Hospital. If you wouldn't mind standing, let Senate give you a warm welcome.
Further introductions. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senior Senator from the 17th and myself, we have seated in the President's Gallery, a chaperone for our honorary pledge today, Zachary Smith. It's his grandfather, John Scott. Mick, if you would stand, and if the members would please make him welcome. Thank you.
Lady from the 63rd, Dr. Dittman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. In the North Gallery, we have joining us today Community Care of West Virginia for Recovery Advocacy Day. We have Chief of Staff Ronna Dittman, who is also my sister-in-law. Dr. Benjamin Jackson, Director of Addiction Medicine. Dr. Kevin Junkins, Chief Medical Officer, Behavioral Health. Christy Walker, Chief Operations Officer, and Peer Recovery Support Specialist Leah Mullins, Judy Utley, Melissa Koch, and C.W. Dent. House, please make them feel welcome.
Gentleman from the 9th, Dr. Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. Paging with us this morning from Pleasants County Middle School, we have Kyle Bullman, and he is accompanied today in the galleries by his father, T.J. Bullman, and I would ask that they please stand and ask the House to please give them a warm welcome.
The gentleman from the 60th, Dr. Farrell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Joining us today, I'd like to introduce a page from my district at Katarina Lowe is an 8th grade student at Sissonville Middle School. She's a member of the choir. She's also very unique. She is one of a very unique in the United States survivor of the COVID MIS-C syndrome. And she was on a ventilator for about a week and in ICU and recovered from that, made a full recovery. And she would sing the national anthem for you, but she can sing. But she definitely, her lungs have recovered. So give her a nice round warm welcome here today. Thank you.
Lady from the 31st, Dr. Mazaki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to have Tonya Shellnut in the North Gallery. She is the National State Government Relation Director for Alliance Defending Freedom. If you would please make her feel welcome.
Gentleman from the 14th, Dr. Fogan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to announce the presence of Kayla Campbell, a former neighbor of mine, optometrist, Drs. Melissa Leone, Alicia Miller, Sean Sammons, Mark Sanelli, Mitch Korber, and Ben Mize. If you would please welcome them.
Gentleman from the 74th, Dr. DeVault.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Marion County Delegates Garcia, Mallow, Summers, and myself, I would like to recognize constituents from Marion County, Pam Vandergrift and Carol Carney. If they could welcome them, please. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 21st, take a cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in the South Gallery, if they would stand when I call their name, are Hurricane High School students Hunter Bernard, Samuel Morris, Matthew Sevilla, and Hayden Hodge. They are here to be a part of and watch the legislative process today. They're accompanied by Robert Ratliff, Cheryl Patrick, and Jessica and Tony Hodge. Will the House please make them all feel very welcome?
Gentleman from the 23rd, take Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have two friends in the North Gallery. They're here to support the passage of House Bill 3278. They're optometrists, Dr. Melissa Leone and once again Dr. Kayla Campbell. If they would stand and the House will please make them feel welcome.
Lady from the 56th, take it Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to introduce a page that I've got from South Charleston Middle School, if Kinsey could stand up. Kinsey Upton is an 8th grader, and she's chaperoned by her father, Tom Upton, and if everyone can make them feel welcome.
Lady from the 71st, take a Kimball.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to draw your attention to the North Gallery, to some friends of mine from Preston County, Brad and Tracy Friend, and other volunteers with the Convention of States.
Gentleman from the 42nd, Doug Steele.
I have a lot of introductions this morning, and probably the most joyous and important one is the presence of a former colleague of ours from Raleigh County, Miss Chanda Atkins, if the House would make her feel welcome. And she is here today in her capacity as a teacher at Greater Beckley Christian School, along with Rebecca Graham. And they have brought Leah Atkins, who is also the daughter of our former colleague, Marissa Corey, Keegan Davidson, and if you'll stand up as I read your name, Alexis Gill, Rylan Laraba, Jesse Milam, Aislinn Pelfrey, Kaylee Price, Joel Smith, Jet Wilcox, and Deegan Williams, if the House would make them feel welcome.
Gentleman from the 45th, Doug Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too have some pages here today from Greater Beckley Christian School, and I would ask these individuals to stand as I call their name out. Brooklyn Bailey, Colin Howell, Levi Jesse, Aaron McGraw, Ethan McGraw, Kyle McMillan, Elijah Sexton, Jackson Shiflett, Gabriel Short, Caden Stevens, and they're being chaperoned by the aforementioned former delegate, Chanda Atkins, Rebecca Graham, and Allison McMillan. So if the House will make them feel welcome.
From the 15th, Doug Keaton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. In the South Gallery, we are joined, I'm excited to say, by my wife, Sadie, and our 17-week-old daughter, who is with her today and every day for the next couple of months. So will the House please make them welcome?
Lady from the 81st, Doug Walker.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. In the West Gallery, I think we are celebrating some social workers. And so when I call your name, please take a stand. We have members and staff of the West Virginia chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, including Executive Director Molly Arbogast. Membership Engagement and Advocacy Specialist Haley Stewart. MSW intern from WVU, Keely Wildman. And BSW intern from West Virginia State University, Tony Stats. Can the House, oh wait, there's more. Social work students and staff from programs across the state, include West Virginia University, Marshall University, Concord University, West Virginia State University, Shepherd University, and social workers from around the state. Look at all of these folks that take care of us each and every day. Look at all of these mountaineers that are making sure that we are being taken care of. I think everyone in the house and all of the galleries should stand up and give them a hand.
Gentleman with the 54th, Doug Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is a tough act to follow, but I will try. We are joined by friends throughout the Capitol today and in our galleries who are here on behalf of Recovery Advocacy Day. Now, Recovery Advocacy Day focuses on identifying and advocating in areas of interest related to recovery, prevention, and treatment primarily of substance use disorders. This year, the event is co-sponsored by the West Virginia chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, West Virginia Behavioral Health Care Providers Association, the West Virginia Alliance for Recovery Residences, and the West Virginia Certification Board for Addiction and Prevention Professionals. Peers with life experience in recovery, professional social workers, counselors, prevention specialists with experience in operating sober living residences, residential treatment centers, and reentry programs are here today to advocate and educate legislators on the topics of the day. Would everybody that's here for Recovery Advocacy Day please stand? And would the House please make them feel welcome? And Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd also throw in an announcement that they will be providing lunch after floor session in the governor's conference room and in the lower rotunda.
Are there other introductions? If not, standing committee reports.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration House Bill 2761 to allow classroom aides with 10 or more years of service and good evaluations to bid on teaching positions, and reports back of committee substitute, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report to be received.
Originating in the Committee on Education and reported with the recommendation that it do pass is House Bill 3555 relating to student purchase and refunds of course material.
Report to be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 3188 relating to the establishment of an alert system for missing cognitively impaired persons, and House Bill 3448 relating generally to probation officer field training, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass.
Report to be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2189 to create the Protection of Property from Warrantless Searches Act, House Bill 2252 relating to establishing criminal penalties for human trafficking, House Bill 3006, West Virginia Critical Infrastructure Protection Act, House Bill 3189, the PFAS Protection Act, and House Bill 3265 removes statutory mandates that the sheriff of a county shall serve process or is responsible for cost of service or arrest by another law enforcement agency, and reports by committee substitutes, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
That report to be received. Are there other standing committee reports today? If not, select committee reports, executive messages, Senate messages, resolutions.
House Resolution 16.
Chairman, 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with, and that each resolution be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the Chamber Automation System.
Gentleman 96th, ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with, and that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the Chamber Automation System. Are there objections? There are no objections. Petitions, bills introduced, motions. Gentleman 13th, Duckett Heckert.
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to be added to bill number 3166.
The gentleman from the 13th, ask unanimous consent to be added as a co-sponsor to House Bill 3166. 3166. Okay, are there objections? Okay, there are no objections. The gentleman's name will be added as a co-sponsor on House Bill 3166. Gentleman from the 29th, Douglas Dillon.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to be added to House Bill 3353 as a co-sponsor.
Okay, the gentleman from the 29th asked unanimous consent to be added as a co-sponsor on House Bill 3353. Are there objections? Okay, there are no objections. The gentleman's name will be so added. Gentleman from the 42nd, Doug Steele, is recognized.
I move to discharge House Bill 2036 from the Committee on Health to the House, and it be read a first time.
Okay, 2036. 2036. The question is on the motion that House Bill 2036 be discharged from the Committee on Health and that it be read a first time. Gentleman from the 96th, Doug Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we table the motion.
Okay, the gentleman from 96 moves that the motion be laid upon the table. Those in favor of the motion to lay upon the table will please say aye. Aye. Roll call is demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is, shall the motion be laid upon the table? Those in favor of the motion to lay upon the table will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk, for what purpose? The gentleman from 51st, Douglas Fassig, recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chair or the clerk read the title of the bill?
Yes, clerk will please read the short title of the bill.
House Bill 2036, allow religious exemptions for vaccines.
Okay, the question again now is on the motion that the motion to discharge House Bill 2036 be laid upon the table. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? Okay, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 63 ayes, 33 nays, and 4 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the motion adopted. Are there further motions at this time? Are there further motions? Okay, if not, are there further motions? Okay, unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 10, Campus Self-Defense Act.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? Okay, if not, chair recognizes the gentleman from the 55th, Doug Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The committee substitute clarifies that state institutions of higher education may not restrict a trained individual from carrying a handgun except as provided in this bill. It allows persons with a concealed handgun license to carry a concealed handgun on the campus and in the buildings of a state institution of higher education. The section applies only to areas and buildings under the custodial possession of the institution and excludes areas rented or leased to private entities. It creates a list of exemptions where firearms may be restricted or prohibited. It also creates exemptions for common areas of residence halls or for employees who are required to be in a residence hall for employment purposes. Requires that the institutions provide either storage lockers in certain residence halls or safes in a residence room at a reasonable fee. It does not prohibit discrimination against an individual or against those persons convicted of a firearm violation related to the prohibited locations. It specifies that a handgun must be concealed and may not be brandished, and such visitors may be criminally charged or disciplined. It provides immunities for the institutions for actions of handgun carriers. It specifies that the section applies to all West Virginia concealed handgun licenses and all licenses of other states recognized by West Virginia. And finally, it provides a delayed effective date of July 1, 2024. Mr. Speaker, that's a summarization of the bill. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Gentleman from the 94th, Doug Kump, recognized.
Permission to speak on the bill, Speaker?
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
On this issue and other issues, I've heard a lot of talk about people of our political persuasion should be more for local control. In fact, I heard the term used yesterday that we ought to give more latitude and grace. I'm also for local control, and the best local control is the individual rights protected under our United States Constitution. Those words mean what they say. The Second Amendment is my gun permit, and that's all I have to say about that.
Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman from the 57, Doug Scaff, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield for a quick question?
Yes.
Chairman does yield.
Like the university sets their own rules and guidelines for many things. So in this bill, when we pass this bill today, if there were an incident or, God forsake, a tragedy, would the university be able to alter this bill, this law, this rule that's forced upon them to accept guns on campus, or would that be legislative action?
What do you mean alter? Could you clarify? What do you mean?
When we put this into code law today, if a university or campus wanted to make changes to it, how would they do that?
They can make any changes they want to their policies as long as they don't run in contravention of the bill before you.
Could they prohibit guns on campus?
Could they ban guns everywhere on campus? Not for those individuals that are trained with a concealed carry permit in areas that are not otherwise secured.
So if we pass this bill allows them in dorm rooms, there's an incident in the dorm room, God forsake, a tragedy, a shooting or something, the university can't alter this plan to remove them from dorm rooms?
It does not. It actually provides that they are not permitted in dorm rooms.
Well, I just meant in the secure areas. They could change where those secure areas are, correct?
The university under, I believe it was subsection 4, subdivision B, can provide appropriate structure apparatuses in the dorms to prevent any firearms from being in them as long as they abide by the provisions of that subdivision.
So once again, if there was a tragedy, they couldn't just say, for example, in alcohol, when there's an alcohol tragedy or something, they decided just to ban alcohol in fraternity houses not too long ago because there was a tragedy, there was a death. They made that choice. They couldn't do that if there was a tragedy related to a gun death on campus. They could not ban guns like they banned alcohol.
Is that a question?
Yes.
Okay. The gentleman from the 20th brought up that it's an alcohol-free campus. So I don't know what the
that's in the past when it wasn't. They made the self-determination to ban alcohol, but they had that choice. The legislators didn't. We didn't. They did.
I would have to look back at what the law stated at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a gun owner, Mr. Speaker, can I?
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
As a gun owner in support of the Second Amendment, like many of my colleagues in here, I have no problems with guns. No problems with the Second Amendment. Right to bear arms. But my question is this. What are our priorities? What are our priorities as a governing body today? What is this, day 41? 42, 41? Close enough. Time flies when you're having fun. What does this have to do to help create jobs in West Virginia? What's this bill do to attract people to West Virginia? Who does it help? Who does it hurt? Who's the bill for? Who's against? The majority, when we have these open forums, we have these forums, we talk about topics. 38 out of 40 spoke against it. I'd say that's a majority. Actually, that's a supermajority in these new terms we use. Supermajority of the speakers were against the bill. Students, faculty, staff, alumni, institution presidents, all against it. So who's for it? Yes, there's faculty for it. Yes, there's students for it. Yes, there's people for it. But they don't represent the vast majority. So we're here today to legislate and mandate and put into code something that a small portion of the people want. 38 out of 40, it's a pretty good reflection, but we do the opposite. I was on the campaign trail, Mr. Speaker, for the last 2 sessions. Knocked on a couple thousand doors. It was fun. Had a good time. Tried to engage conversation with people. What do you guys care about? What do you want me to do when I get down to Charleston? Create jobs, fix our economy, focus on public education, better health care, lower my taxes, keep my streets paved, fix those potholes, infrastructure. Not one person said, go down there and put guns on campus. Shocking. But this is a priority of us. What's funny is I went back and looked at a lot of our new faces in here, looked at your campaign pages, just recently as yesterday. I'm not going to call you out individually, and correct me if I'm wrong. Most of you said, we're for smaller government. Yes, local control. Not one person said, I'm going to go down there to Charleston and put guns on campus. If I did, I stand corrected. Please correct me. I will stand here and apologize, but I didn't see it on anybody's Facebook page or website that said your number one platform priority was put guns on college campuses in West Virginia. But here we are. We're doing it. But you know what I did see? The word freedom. Everywhere. Everywhere. Gentleman from the 46th, it's bigger than your name. God bless you. Freedom. But what about the freedom of cities, businesses, institutions, college campuses? We don't care about that freedom. We don't care about their freedom. We care about the individual only, but not the higher institutions' freedom to change their own laws, to change their own rules and regulations, to adapt and overcome as issues arise, like they did back when I was in school. We had this area out there at the Blue Lot. It was called the Student Pit. It was an eyesore. It was fun, but it was bad. A lot of stuff happened there. Guess what? Alcohol was allowed. The tailgate students were allowed back then. University shut it down because there was an incident there. There was a tragedy. There was a death. They shut it down. They didn't come here to Charleston and ask us to pass a law to ban alcohol or nothing. They did it themselves because they could. So what's next? We really going to legislate how these college campuses, tell them what they're going to serve in the cafeterias next, what they can teach, what they can't teach, micromanaging these schools? They don't allow dogs in dorms because it interferes with higher institutional learning. They don't allow them. But there's dogs throughout the campus. You can walk through campus carrying them. They don't allow alcohol in the dorms, but you can walk through campus carrying a 12-pack, 6-pack. You can walk through campus. Same thing here. You can walk through campus, the argument's made, you can carry a gun through campus. Occasionally there comes a bill, Mr. Speaker. Every once in a while, you just look in the mirror and you say, really? Really? Is this what we're focusing on today? With all the issues we got going here in West Virginia, how is this going to move the needle? We are sitting here working so hard to keep our young people in West Virginia and attract people here. So our solution, giving guns on campus? Going to college, you know, is considered to be one of the most brightest, most entertaining, difficult times, emotional times in someone's life. Wonderful, but it can be crazy, it can be hectic, nerve-wracking, but definitely emotional. It tugs at your emotional health. You know, there was one student that told me, Doug, I'm not going to go to college in West Virginia because you guys don't allow guns. But a lot of them did tell me, if you pass this legislation, they will not be going to college in West Virginia. But politics aside, Mr. Speaker, NRA vote, not NRA vote, whatever, I heard the argument, the gentleman from the 100 said, it's just not fair. We allow 18, 19, and 20-year-olds to go in the war, go into combat, carry a gun. But we're treating those 18, 19, 20-year-olds on campus differently. I just shook my head. I didn't say anything. I thought about it overnight. Seriously? We're going to compare those 18, 19, 20-year-olds who've been properly trained and educated to go in the war. They signed up to go in the war and learn how to use a weapon, the same that we're treating an 18-year-old just out of school, out of high school, in the campus, who has a 20-hour work day, 20-hour school day. They're in a dorm for the first time, away from their parents. They have boyfriend, girlfriend. They have issues. There's drugs. There's alcohol. There's all type of vices. We're going to treat them the same as people who are trained and operated 18, 19, 20 years old? Crazy. You're kidding yourself. It's not the same. Yeah, I felt like going to war with my teacher a couple times, but it's not the same. No one has ever addressed the real issue here. Mental health. Mental health. A lot of professionals here today do a lot of good for the people of West Virginia. Thank you for that. I've had a bill out there, House Bill 2182, mental health bill. The purpose of this bill is to acknowledge the mental health of higher education students and make it a paramount importance because they have so many issues, especially coming out of COVID-19. Hasn't moved, hasn't seen the light of day. We have this record surplus. Just give a little bit of money. Give $1 million. Give $500,000. Let's address mental health, make it a priority. Nah. But, you know, I won't belabor the issue, but I know this bill is going to pass today, Mr. Speaker. It's ironic, last week you had Michigan State, Virginia Tech, you had Temple, numerous situations occurred on college campus. This is what we're focusing on. You know, just because we have a supermajority here, just because you can pass whatever you want, doesn't mean you should. Doesn't mean you should. As a former colleague stated in a local newspaper, the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the Second Amendment proposed by very smart people, one of those persons was our second president, James Madison. And I want to read it right, so I want anybody to correct me. James Madison, I'm sorry, our fourth president said, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But what did our forefathers mean by those words? What did they mean? Wonder what they meant when it came to guns on college campuses. We don't have to guess what they meant. You know why? They left us a written record of what they meant. In 1819, Thomas Jefferson, our second president, there you go, Delegate Rowe, I got it right. Third president, I got it wrong. Good thing I was a business major. Good thing I was a business major, not a history major. Thomas Jefferson created the University of Virginia after he was president. You know what he did? It was a public university similar to WVU. We created WVU 45 years ago, flagship institution, designed to educate leaders of tomorrow, institutional knowledge, cultivate people. James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, both board members and former presidents, voted in favor of a resolution that stated, no student shall, within the precincts of the university, introduce, keep, or use weapons that harm or kill anyone. No fighting weapons. If so, they would be kicked out of school. They would be gone. No place for them. But wait a second. That resolution was adopted by the same person who wrote the Second Amendment. The same person. He didn't think it was a conflict. He didn't think it infringed upon your Second Amendment rights. Why would he sign that resolution? Talking about James Madison. He created the Second Amendment, and he also made it a point on the first university to say and write down and sign his name that it should not be allowed on college campuses. So my point is, if we respect the Second Amendment so much and what it means, why do we not respect what they wrote when it comes to guns on college campuses? The same. It was wrote by the same person. So I'll leave you with this. Mr. Speaker, you know, I've been moved and honored to serve in this House under your leadership. And this whole time, what is our mission? We want to do whatever we can so we can make West Virginia a better place to live, work, and raise a family. Somewhere, we got our priorities screwed up. And I know you all haven't changed the mission statement to say, let's live, work, and carry a gun on campus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 29th, Doug Dillon's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know we have a lot of bills on third reading today, so I'll be very brief. I think most of the Republican delegates in this body share a similar philosophy, and I won't speak to their websites and their campaign materials specifically, but I know what was on mine, and I can speak for mine. And on my materials, my website, and my cards that were handed out, it said the words, "Guns save lives." And I think we firmly understand that in this body. And as a father of 3 daughters and 1 son, all young children, oftentimes I don't sleep that well at night, but it's not because I have had any trouble with any of the votes I've cast so far in this session. But if I voted anything but green for this bill, I would have a great deal of difficulty going to sleep tonight, because I know when my children grow up and they're ready to go off to college, I know that if I didn't give them every opportunity to defend themselves when they're crossing campus or encountering hazardous circumstances where a cry out or an emergency situation might be only 5 minutes to be addressed, but it only takes 5 seconds for someone to be permanently damaged, permanently injured, or worse. So, Mr. Speaker, I will be an affirmative yay vote on SB 10 today, and I believe we're going to light that board up, green up and down. Thank you very much.
The gentleman with 79, Tuckett Hansen, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For me, this is a question about whether guns on campus make our kids and our faculty members and staff members more safe or less safe, on balance. We spent some time yesterday talking about whether 18, 19, and 20-year-olds should be included in the bill. Ultimately, it was the decision of this body to leave them in the bill. I still have very significant concerns about people of that age who are going off to college for the first time and encountering new situations, safely handling guns. Again, whether it's this bill is making us more safe or less safe. There was a little bit of debate yesterday about the training that a Marine gets versus the training that somebody gets to earn a concealed carry permit in West Virginia, and how different that training is. And we heard testimony about that from a former Marine in committee. And the question really is whether somebody who's under extreme duress in an active shooter situation can instantly transform themselves into a specially trained tactical police officer. Can that happen? Will that happen? Because even the most highly trained members of the military, the most highly trained members of our police forces, they see the accuracy of their shooting decrease when they're under duress, when they're engaged in a gunfight. It's just the way it is. So I'm concerned that this will make things less safe. I'm concerned about the alcohol and drug use on campus. You know, don't tell me that alcohol doesn't make people more aggressive or that alcohol doesn't impair people's judgment. Don't tell me that alcohol is going to make people a better shot and more likely to hit the bad guy than the good guy. That's just not going to happen. And I'm concerned, like the previous speaker said, about our mental health crisis and the fact that so many people on campus suffering from mental health issues have suicidal thoughts. If you have suicidal thoughts and you add a gun into the mix, you're more likely to have a suicidal death than simply a suicidal thought. The one thing that has not been mentioned yet, but is also a big issue in terms of safety on campus, is the negligent discharge of firearms. And I have some examples that I wanted to bring to your attention, some examples that have occurred in other states that have taken this path. One example is in Idaho, a few months after passage of a law that forced Idaho colleges to allow guns to be carried on campus. A professor with a permit unintentionally shot himself in the leg during a chemistry lab. And then 2 years later, in 2016, a student who had a permit in Texas unintentionally discharged his gun in a dorm room. And then in 2017, a Utah student with a concealed carry permit fired his gun in a campus cafeteria. He hit a table and a light fixture. And then in 2019 in Georgia, a student shot himself unintentionally in a campus lounge. So these types of negligent gun violence, unintended consequences do happen and would make our campus less safe rather than more safe. No bill's black and white, no bill's all good, all bad. The question is, did we get the boundaries right in this bill? Those 12 exceptions that are in there, are those appropriate? Or if we're going to pass this bill, do we need more? I don't think the balance is in the right place in this bill. That's why I'm voting no.
The gentleman from the 46th, second Honecker is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think anyone doubted probably that I would rise to speak on this bill today, and may even say one or two things that will surprise you. I know there are veterans in our group. We have a Veterans Caucus this year, and I guess we're the ones most identified as the experts. We've heard the testimony of the professor from Marshall, who is a Marine. By the way, we don't say former Marine. There's no such thing. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And I've actually had some conversation with that gentleman since he appeared here and testified before judiciary. And one thing that veterans do not do, and I can speak of our veterans in here on this bill, we have not supposed to take some moral high ground and conduct ourselves as if our opinions mattered more than anyone else's. Whether we're talking about veterans or patriotism or any of the issues, and I'm appreciative of that because that's not why we served. And I don't assume to take the patriotic high ground and somehow talk down my nose at any of you just because I have some military service, just like our other veterans. Which leads me to this. As a law enforcement officer, as a retired law enforcement officer, I don't want anything I say today to come across like I'm lecturing you, because I'm not. I care too much about you. And I do respect how different we feel on this. It seems like we have adamantly against, adamantly for, and a very small group in the middle that just aren't sure, because I've talked to a couple of you. I love it that I'm this far along and my campaign mantra of freedom first is still resonating in the chamber with my friend, the minority leader. Those signs were apparently very effective. I've had to be courageous in my life. I've had to be brave. But I can really stand here today and tell you, I don't for one second consider myself any more brave or any more courageous than the person in here who has wrestled your way out of the shackles of systemic poverty. I don't think I'm any more courageous or any more brave than that person under the sound of my voice that you have managed to crawl up out of that dark hole of addiction. If you're sitting in here today and you have fought and battled cancer, I have greater respect for you than you could ever imagine. I know that courage comes in a lot of different ways. But when I think about this issue, I want the record to be clear. We are all equal here. So as I do begin to talk about the law enforcement side, it's not to do so in a condescending way, and it may even surprise you to know we probably agree on some of the concerns with this bill. I get a little frustrated with the people that talk about this issue and they don't know the difference between a clip in a magazine or a semi-automatic and automatic, and sometimes we're fighting against people that haven't done their homework, and that's been pointed out pretty well. And after all, I'm the one who in Judiciary Committee called this a vain race to the I told you so trophy. Because that's how it's going to turn out either way. I mean, there's only three things that can happen. We can pass this, and all of a sudden the world becomes puppy dogs and lollipops, and we all fall in love with each other and nothing ever happens. But I hate to tell you, that's not likely. So what really the two options are is it passes and there's a spike in suicides with firearms, or there's an accidental discharge and somebody, God forbid, would be injured or killed, and then that side will say, see, we told you so. But on the other side, God forbid, somebody walks onto one of our campuses with the idea of doing harm, and someone providentially is there and armed and prepared, and they stop it, and then we get to point our finger at the other side and say, see, we told you so. But either way, that's probably where we're headed in all of this. That's just the way it is. And what makes this issue even more weighty for me is this isn't just a policy issue, even though it is a policy issue. What makes it even more weighty is it is in fact a constitutional issue. We cannot escape that. I have raised my right hand and swore to uphold the Constitution 4 times in my life, to become a Marine, to become a trooper, to become the Director of Homeland Security in Greenbrier County, and to become a delegate for the state of West Virginia 4 times. If I have to do it a 5th time, I will. So I've been trying to make that case that sometimes it's not even about how I feel as much as what I've sworn to do. And in the Judiciary Committee, I spoke on this bill, and I did relive only a few of the sights and the sounds of what I experienced on April 16th, 2007. It was ugly. Absolutely ugly. It was disturbing, it was horrific, and it was sad. I can't even imagine today, at the ripe old age of 57, trying to walk into Norris Hall on the campus of Virginia Tech today. I don't even know if I could do it. I am that impacted. But I sure know what it looked like on that day. I remember the looks in the faces of those kids. I remember thinking, I cannot believe how much blood is in this hallway and on these walls and running out of these kids. I can remember those cell phones ringing non-stop and looking at colleagues then trying to figure out, should we answer those phones? These cell phones in these dead kids' pockets was ringing incessantly, non-stop. Because by then it was national news. Everybody was hearing, everybody was calling to check on their children. I was literally in a hallway, not unlike the East Wing here. That would be close to what Norris Hall looked like, with 31 dead bodies. Most of them kids. Had my own kids at home. You can imagine I thought about them. I still know the faces. I still know the blood. I still hear the ringing cell phones I shared with colleagues. I could go to Kroger tonight to get a gallon of milk and somebody down the aisle have one of those same ringtones, and it just almost makes me drop my head right there in the middle of Kroger, because it takes me back to Norris Hall. The idea of the innocence that was shattered, and the realization of what humanity had become, and the shattered idea of this, please hear me, the shattered idea of this, it can never happen here. It'll never happen here. It happens somewhere else. It'll never happen at WVU. It'll never happen at Marshall. It'll never happen at New River Community College. It'll never happen there. Once the chaos was, to whatever degree the chaos could begin to settle, I found myself standing in a command center about a third the size of this room, and one of the first things that happened, I hadn't walked in the room, I could not have possibly been in that room more than 2 minutes when somebody hands me a cell phone and says, "Mike, we don't know what to say. This is so-and-so's parents." It was one of the dead kids, their mom and dad. And I had to take the phone and talk to somebody that was in Massachusetts trying to figure out how to get to Virginia Tech to see if their child was still alive, and have to tell them on the phone, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. But your child was one of the students killed today. And I'm here, and I'm going to meet you here when you get here." Listen, I won't beleaguer this. My duty over the next 2 weeks there, but specifically the next 48 hours, was to make death notifications and to help with death confirmations, to sit down with parents, even with the bullet holes in the kid's face, to get positive identification and to help them with making arrangements. And I said all that to say this as I close. I shared with the Judiciary Committee that when I got home that night, it was 2 a.m., I had 4 hours to maybe grab something to eat, change clothes, maybe, as if somebody could go to sleep and I had to go back because I had more families coming in. My wife was waiting at the door. My kids had already went to bed. And how many of you know that I went into my kids' rooms, one was in grade school and one middle school at the time, and I hugged them a lot tighter, even though they were asleep, than probably I ever had before in my life. My wife followed me to the bedroom, and I sat on the foot of the bed, and she said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "You can get me some Windex and some paper towels, because I've got to get these kids' blood off my shoes." And like a dutiful wife, she walked into the kitchen. She comes back with a wad of paper towels and the Windex, and I start spraying it. And those paper towels went from white to red very quickly. And oddly enough, I sit there and held those balled up paper towels, and I looked at her and I said, I don't even know if I can throw these away. I feel like I'm throwing a part of these kids away. After all, the Bible says the life is in the blood. And here I am with wads of paper towels. So I will close with this. There's a reason I feel strongly about this issue. There is a reason that I don't want to interfere with someone else's ability to defend themselves if they feel like they need to defend themselves. We are not, you'll hear some of the rhetoric here is we're going to give guns to college students. No, we're not. It's a free country. We're not giving them to anybody. say, we're going to put guns on college campuses. No, we're not. We're just going to tell free, law-abiding American citizens they have a second constitutional right to carry a firearm if they want. Please hear me. Years ago, I sat on the foot of my bed with Windex and paper towels, and I washed the blood of almost 30 kids off of my shoes because of an active shooter on a college campus. I fear that if I do not support this legislation and it happens again, washing their blood off of my shoes will not compare to trying to wash their blood off of my hands because I disarmed them when the wolf came. And because of that, I will support this legislation, and I will urge you to do the same. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 53rd, Dr. Pritz, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I appreciate the delegate from the 46th and those words. That's a tough act to follow. But he raises some excellent points. Now, I'll say this, and I think this is a point that very much needs to be the focus of why we should be supporting legislation like this. Individual rights are not circumstantial. They shouldn't depend on where a person is. There should be no such thing as a second-class constitutional right. And that's what we're talking about here. There's a lot of talk about whether something may or may not happen, but there hasn't been any talk, I don't think up to this point, at least amongst some of the people who have spoken, on what it means to have an actual constitutional right. This is a right, in fairness, it is fairly unique in the world. This is a right that we have as Americans, but it's for good reason. It's based on our history, it's based on our founders and the trials and tribulations that they faced. So it was put there for a reason. And it's not like this constitutional right that we have and the implementation of it, if we're talking about campus carry, that we're in isolation. There are 11 other states in the United States that have campus carry. Okay? I mean, if you look at our electorate and what people want here in the state of West Virginia, it's clear as day to me. If you just look at what the past presidential results were, about who we went for president, it's very clear that we have strong support for the Second Amendment. I mean, we're arguably the first or second most pro-Second Amendment state in the Union, yet there are 11 other states who had campus carry before us. Now, I think that there's a lot of good things about this bill. To many of us, perhaps it was a bit of a compromise bill, but nonetheless, it's a step in the right direction towards protecting individual rights. Now, I want to ask you this. I've heard a lot of stereotyping about young people. I've heard a lot of talk about, well, what is going to happen on a college campus? Well, I don't think we should necessarily be judging a person based on their age and what they may or may not do. And I think that's what's really sending the wrong message to people, that we're not respecting the individual rights of college students. They have and should have the same rights as everybody else. Now, I would say this as well. Let's say that we have a person who doesn't respect the rules, who believes they're not going to get caught. And let's say you've got somebody like that who possibly has bad intentions. What's to stop them right now from going on a college campus with a gun? There's nothing. What this does is this makes it so that people who respect the rules are going to have a permitting process, and they're going to have the ability to, if something goes wrong, they're going to have the ability to protect themselves. I've also heard it claimed that, well, we're not respecting local rule. We're not respecting the rights of cities and colleges and universities. Well, the one thing that we're here to do is not necessarily to protect the rights of a municipality or any governmental entity. We're here to protect individual rights, and nothing is more local than the individual being able to make a choice for themselves, in particular one that is enshrined in the Constitution. I think this is a good bill. I think it's important that in this and so many other ways we stand up for our constitutional rights, individual rights, and Mr. Speaker, I would urge support.
The gentleman from the 80th, Williams, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have really good news. I know we're talking about stereotypes and what the effect of this would possibly be, but the good news is there are people who have studied this before. Johns Hopkins School of Education studied this, and one of the authors examined the 111 high fatality mass shootings defined as 6 or more murder victims that occurred in the United States since 1966 and found that only 13 of them had taken place in a gun-free zone. The report also concluded that these types of laws don't limit gun violence on campuses, rather they increase them. And as for college campuses, the report notes that fights, suicide attempts, and reckless behavior, all of which are more lethal when a firearm is present, are far more common among college students in general than are opportunities for armed students to stop rampages. Now, I would not be dismissive of college students and their ability to defend themselves. When I was a student at West Virginia University, I knew veterans on campus. I knew what I had some idea of what they had done for our country. No one can ever know unless you did it. I trust them. I believe that they're capable. But a false assumption that I think we're making is that every single one of these folks that's going to be carrying a gun on campus is going to be Clint Eastwood or Timothy Dalton, ready to fight. Really what the data tells us is that in these instances, a good guy with a gun, meaning well, actually makes things more complicated, makes things harder on law enforcement when they do arrive on the scene. I like data. I like facts, and that's what the facts tell us. I've talked on this same issue before about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I think he was the 32nd president. I don't want to get too hard on that because it didn't go so well for my friend. I think he was the 32nd president. But I've talked about his 4 freedoms before: the freedom of speech, the freedom from want, the freedom of religion, and the freedom from fear. The freedom from fear, the ability to leave your house and not worry that something awful is going to happen to you. And perhaps this isn't enshrined in one of our nation's more important documents. It was just in a State of the Union speech. But I think the freedom from fear goes hand in hand with the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think those things go hand in hand. And when we talk about this, we have students who descended upon this Capitol last week to tell us, I don't know if I'm going to go to college here if this bill passes. We need to help them stay in West Virginia. We need to listen to data sets that tell us that this probably isn't the best idea we've come up with. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 66th, Doug Nestor, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to come at this body from any sort of deep constitutional philosophical approach or anything like that. I feel like I have some atonement to do for the way I was on the bill when it was initially brought to my attention. I was steadfast against it. I never thought this would make me an expert in anything, but I had 8.5 of continuous years at West Virginia University, and probably makes me a pretty good lawyer, I think. Like to think so. In any event, that environment when I was there, I don't know what it's like today, but it almost encourages you to keep up this party mentality, almost encourages you to be your unnatural self by drinking and consuming alcohol. I will tell you that when I was there, I felt very kept, very secure, very protected. Had a wonderful time. I would never change going back to that institution for anything. It was the best time I've ever had in my life, and I love the institution very much. And I do think it's a safe place to send your kids to today. But I saw some things when I was there, lots of things, because I was there for a long time. I saw some horrible incidences, some very inhuman incidences, some fights. They were bloody. We're talking broken glass, broken jaw, things that would have never occurred but for this alcohol consumption when people weren't acting like themselves. Some of those occasions, people were perceivably friends a couple days later. Other times, it was not the case. And specifically, after my time at West Virginia University, and when I first had this bill brought to my attention, I thought about a circumstance that I read about in the media. Probably many of you all did as well. It dealt with a child. They're all children when you're an undergrad, and in my opinion, even if you directly head into a master's degree or further in your education, you're 25 years old or less. We had an incident that involved in Morgantown a kid, I never knew him, named Ryan DeVinny. There were two people, Ryan DeVinny and his group. There was another group that consisted of a guy named Austin Van Treese and a gentleman named Jonathan May. And what occurred that night was an argument, from my understanding, over a baseball game, a professional baseball game, a game that's played by one team over 160 times a year. So it shows you how insensical this argument must have been. But that argument resulted in Ryan DeVinny being stricken, punched by one, kicked in the head by the other, had his eyes so shut, lived in a vegetative state, and died fairly recently. I don't like to bring that to anyone's attention other than it's a fact, and it's a fact that we have to labor under when we deliberate on this bill. And when I put all that together and did my own balancing test, I thought to myself, this is a bad bill. We have alcohol, we have a bunch of kids, their brains aren't completely formed yet, and we're going to promote gun handling within a college campus. Most specifically, my personal experiences would have demonstrated that from time to time, I would have thought that there would have been more fatalities that resulted from that. But I kept thinking and I kept listening. I saw reformations in the bill. I saw protections being added, like you can't have the gun in the dormitory. You can't have the gun in an athletic venue at these universities. And then, as you all just heard, a very diluted version. I actually heard a better version from the gentleman from the 46th Delegate Honaker in the Judiciary Committee. And that changed my opinion on everything. It changed my opinion on everything because I wasn't looking at this. I was looking at this from one perspective, one that, for whatever reason, by nature, I felt like I needed to see it through. But then I thought to myself, what if just the mere fact that some of these people in that group on Mr. DeVinny's night might have had a gun, may not have, but just the fact that there might have been one abounding might have caused someone some pause, some serious positive hesitation about whether to keep their hands to themselves or not. Might have saved this gentleman's life. And so I think about that, and I'll tell you, some of these bills, they're few and far between, but some of them really, really keep me awake at night. Because the success of this bill will mean that it only prevents things that we'll never know about. So you will never have an opportunity to applaud it if it passes. But when I heard the gentleman from the 46th, and I thought deeply about it, I thought, if there were guns around, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Maybe 1 out of 50 kids wants to carry a gun, whatever. If they can mitigate or deter some type of massacre, which we have been fortunate as a state to have never had happen, and I believe that I base it on a fact of 2016, this body implemented constitutional carry. Well, I haven't seen too many incidences of road rage. I certainly haven't seen any massacres in the movie theaters or churches or what have you. So when I did my own balancing test, I feel like I owe an explanation to the people I emailed and I talked to on the phone and everyone in this body. I'm going to be for the bill. It's a tough call for me, but when I look at it objectively, I think it's the right decision that's going to be made. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 25th, Delegate Hornbuckle is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Listen. Yesterday, I started off with the word listen. My good friend and colleague from the 80th from Morgantown, today he talked about listen, research, and data. All of us that share this body, before we came down here, we got elected, almost everyone back home says, now don't you go up there and be like Washington. Across the board, regardless of party. Don't do all the infighting. Come up with some good solutions. Come up with good ideas. I've set forth this legislative session, as I've said many a times, to bring statesmanship back. To bring statesmanship back. There will be times where some of my Democrat colleagues will not be happy with my stances. There might be a lot of times where some of my Republican colleagues might not be happy with my stances, but I will always strive to do the work of the people. And so to my good friend from the 53rd, made an assertion that West Virginia has spoke loud and clear on this issue. West Virginians have spoke loud and clear that they prioritize gun ownership, Second Amendment. They did not, however, speak loud and clear for campus carry. To the contrary, the most recent polling shows that almost 72% says that they don't want this. The majority. And what are we doing here? We listen to the majority. That's how it goes in life. The majority of West Virginians do not want guns on campus. Do not conflate the two issues. Then if you travel to those campuses, I know mine back at home at Marshall is like most higher education institutions. Over 90% of those faculty do not want this. And so I keep hearing that common term, listen. To listen to the people. Not to do as you wish, but to do the wishes of the people that sent you here. And sometimes I know that's tough, but you have to set those personal preferences aside. Then to listen to the students. I've heard this individual rights. I've heard from my fellow friend from the 46, he said, respect how different people might feel on this issue. My really good buddy from the 66 talked about perspectives. And if I was going from one perspective of a student, I could fall on either side of this issue. But if I'm respecting the differences, as the gentleman from the 46 said, I would have put an amendment forward that did not ban guns on campus in any way, didn't even ban them from residence halls. All it gave was the universities was the ability to designate separate dorms for students to respect their differences and their different perspectives. Because what we're missing here are that some students might like to have those firearms with them. Some students might not want to have that. So what do? We say we're going to ignore them. And we're not going to listen to them. So we couldn't come together and compromise and say, okay, we can have them on campus, but we're not going to have them in dorms. No, we can have them in dorms, but we're just going to make separate dorms to respect the individual rights of all students. And so since we have disrespected all students, and Brad Smith and Gordon Gee and all those university presidents, I can't go for this because we didn't respect their individual rights. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 5th, like a Fluhart, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak to the bill.
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
Well, I can't help but notice that we're here for campus carry, not capital carry, not capital carry, because we can't have guns here. But apparently we know enough. We know enough to say that guns belong on campuses all over the place. We know enough to say they belong in dorm rooms. Hear about smaller government all the time from this body. I've yet to see it implemented this session. We're ignoring and superseding administrators, ignoring and superseding faculty, ignoring and superseding students, college presidents, all of whom have said no thanks. In fact, if they thought this was a good policy, they would have implemented it on their own years ago. They didn't. You know, we hear about mental health all the time, usually after a tragedy. They put a microphone in front of a politician's face and they say, well, it's not a gun problem, it's really a mental health issue. But I looked high and low in this bill, and not a penny is going to mental health issues on college campuses, despite the fact suicides in West Virginia, 73% of all gun deaths, 73% of all gun deaths, suicides. Yet not a penny to support mental health on college campuses in West Virginia. The college experience. As the gentleman said back there, had quite a few years in Morgantown, had a good experience. The college experience is one where you find yourself, where it involves freedom, freedom of expression. It's really the place where the First Amendment really shines. And I feel like this will stifle the First Amendment. This will stifle freedom of expression. Are you going to attend a controversial speaker series if you know guns are everywhere? Are you going to participate as a student in a controversial subject matter if you know guns are everywhere? We've gone so obsessed with gun culture, we've now started the gun curriculum here in West Virginia, where students will be worried about day in and day out, who's packing heat? Are they in class right now? And as my colleague said, this isn't popular. Maybe if we spent the time, got out of our Facebook groups, little bubbles we live in as politicians, and actually spoke to people like students, administrators, faculty, you would know this isn't popular. It's not popular for West Liberty University or anybody else up north, I can tell you that much. Just a couple weeks ago, we celebrated Bob Huggins here. He came down, Hall of Fame coach, loved me some Huggy Bear. It's funny. I haven't heard anything from Huggins or anybody else involved in college athletics who said, you know what, you need to help me recruit, guys. Help me recruit. You need to hurry up and pass that campus carry bill. It's going to help me recruit some athletes here to WVU and other places. It's not. I was on campus in 2007 during the backyard brawl, the infamous 13-9 game. We won't talk about that. But I know that afterwards, Pat McAfee received death threats. Those death threats are going to feel a little more at home when you have a campus full of guns. We haven't talked about that. We haven't talked about how it's going to impact college athletics. They'll use this against us. They'll use this in recruiting against us, for sure. So when it comes time to recruit shooters in the state of West Virginia, they belong on the basketball programs, not in the dorm rooms. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady in 81st, Lieutenant Walker's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield for some questions, please?
Chairman does yield.
Thank you, my friend. Can you tell me how many concealed pistol and revolver licenses we have in West Virginia?
I'm told maybe in the range of 500,000.
500,000. Can you tell me how many of those are provisional?
No, I cannot.
Can you tell me how many of those licenses have been revoked in the past 5 years?
We could get that information, but that would be a county by county. The state does not keep that.
Can you tell me how many states who have concealed carry can carry in West Virginia?
Let me make sure I'm clear. Is it how
So-
many? Oh, sorry.
So, you know, if we have a West Virginia concealed carry, we can carry in other states. So how many other states can carry here in West Virginia?
I believe it's about 36 states that we have reciprocity with.
36 states we have reciprocity with. Do you know how many of those actually have concealed permits? So we have 500,000 in West Virginia, including those 36 states. What is our total number now?
Oh, you mean taking in? I can't speak for other states.
Okay. What happens if someone from those 36 other states have a domestic and West Virginia doesn't know?
We don't police other states' CHLs. That is handled by the individual state by state.
So we could have someone with a concealed carry permit that should not have it on campus because they have a restraining order against them in their state.
That would be a prohibited person.
Is good guy defined in the code anywhere? Is good guy defined in the code anywhere?
Is it contained within this bill?
Yes.
No, I don't see that terminology used in the
Okay.
bill.
And how many exceptions are in this bill?
Let me look so I can get you an accurate count.
Thank you.
I think it is 12.
Does this bill have a fiscal note?
This bill does not contain a fiscal note.
How many higher education facilities do we have in West Virginia?
This would only apply to public institutions.
And how many of those do we have?
I don't have the exact number in front of me.
Does every one of those public institutions have university police?
I'm not sure. I think most of them do.
If they didn't have university law enforcement, what agency would assist that public university?
I mean, the local law enforcement will always assist.
Okay. And on page 40, lines 18 through 21, we speak about metal detectors and metal wands and other equipment. How many public universities currently have that?
I can't speak for how many universities have this sort of equipment right now, but I would think that probably some of them do, but I can't speak to the exact inventory of the schools in West Virginia.
Yes, sir. So I have pulled both applications for a concealed pistol revolver and also provisional. Can someone from another country apply for a concealed permit?
If they are a resident alien and they take up residence.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Speak to the bill.
Ladies
Mr.
recognized.
Speaker. Today is Fat Tuesday, colleagues. But I can't say Happy Mardi Gras, because there was some gun violence in New Orleans during a parade. See, I wore orange today and not my purple, gold, and green. See, I wear orange today for a future free from gun violence. Now, I understand that, and I respect many of my colleagues, and especially the one from the 46. I can only imagine. But also my friend from the 39th. He and I have intense conversations about the Second Amendment. It is our birthright. The United States of Constitution. Red, white, and blue. For me and you. We've heard that guns saves lives. Freedom first. I told you so. It will never happen here. And individual rights From the delegate from the 53rd, you're absolutely right. We should not promote ageism, but we also should not promote ableism, elitism, sexism, racism. We always speak about the frontal lobe not being developed. When we speak about individual rights, I no longer have the right to my body. So someone carried a concealed permit has more rights, individual rights. The United States Constitution. Parents, you can be a parent, but health care for your child, individual rights, we're going to bring that one on back. But a person with a concealed permit, the Freedom Eagle flies for that person. We speak about local control. We speak about our experiences on different colleges and universities. And we spoke about mental health and suicide. Well, my experience, my first semester was a little different. Because what I didn't hear not one person speak about in this chamber was sexual assault. My, it's quiet in here. You can't even hear a mouse pissing on cotton. We've spoken about daughters and sons, and when they grow up, you want them to have the right to conceal carry on campus. And we're speaking about public institutions. This is where we start getting uncomfortable. What do we do with the students and the faculty who has never been around a firearm? Are we going to make them go through orientation so they can understand the difference between a clip and a magazine? What happens to that first generation college student? Come on, we got to talk about it. We live in West by God, Virginia, that we're turning into the Wild Wild West. See, I leave all of myself on this floor. And when I first got here, I lived in a gated community in Cheat Lake. Life happened. I went into HUD housing, where my lease stated I could no longer have firearms. Yeah, clear your throat real good on that one. So what happens to the college student, and their age range differently, who has lived in a home where firearms were not allowed? They see firearms with only law enforcement, DNR officers, university police, when they walk into a courtroom. It's different than playing a video game. What's going to happen when we have a firearm on the PRT? These universities are part of our neighborhoods. K through 12 students go there for field trips. See, being a single mother, a single black mother, with 2 kings. When they got to 18 without having any interruptions with law enforcement, not a record, I felt we made it. When my oldest son chose to go to WVU on a full ride versus going to UVA, we made it. And he's just as outspoken as his mother. Maybe a little bit more. Now, he may not have died a horrendous death, and it was cancer that stole my baby from me. But was he going to be considered a good guy with a concealed permit? Or was the color of his skin going to be weaponized? Was all the training that he done with anyone to get that permit, pay the $15 or the $25, was he going in? The shoulda, coulda, wouldas. You think we have unsolved cases in Title IX now with assaults on campus? Now what? Two years ago, we were in the middle of session. I just got here. All I could do was press my button and ask the speaker, we need a moment of silence. Because there was gun violence on campus. Where were the good guys? It's not defined. There's a lot of stigmas. It's not defined. There's a lot of biases. It's not defined. Second Amendment all day. I ask many of you who live nearby, when can we go to the gun range? So don't never get it twisted. And I don't care about an NRA report card. And it doesn't matter what I want to do. I must listen to my constituents, the students, the parents, the grandparents, the professors. No, the president of these universities may not mean nothing to you. They're not going to mean anything to anyone, because the students will not come to West Virginia public universities. So we do all of this for the Promise Scholarship. And these kids have worked hard all these years. What are we investing in? Let's talk about it. Intimidation. Do I think someone with a concealed carry will intimidate anyone? Not everyone. A delegate from the 47 celebrated that we voted together in another committee. And how I wish we could vote together on this. But what happens to the sexual assault victim? What happens to that person We want these lockers on these campuses. Did we even speak to the resident advisors? What about our universities that have the Divine Nine? That's the African American fraternities and sororities. So I'm going to speak about myself, because the minority speaker spoke about his adventures being a student, and my friend spoke about his, and my colleague from mine spoke about his. So I'm going to speak about mine. One day, one night, leaving from tutoring basketball athletes, always a tomboy. My USL baseball hat, USL blue sweatshirt, and I'm gonna age myself because I had some blue and white plaid Daisy Dukes. I was assaulted from the back. He took a souvenir. One tennis shoe. I was that kid that liked Esprit tennis shoes. They were navy green and yellow. And my underwear. And I was stuck. And so was the good guy. My university police officer was stuck. She was a female. She knew my routine. I wasn't loose on campus. I didn't have on any perfume. I didn't have on any red lipstick. I wasn't gyrating or twerking. The hardest report of my life, and the good guy was the first one there. Freeze, fight, or flight. How could both of us be frozen? You're the good guy. You're the trained one. And I can tell you, whether there was any kind of weapon on that campus that night, because of my mental, because I felt like everything was taken from me, I would have been one of those statistic numbers. First generation college student. My mother was working 4 jobs. I couldn't even call her because this particular employer would have fired her. My father was offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. And I wasn't sure who the supervisor was that evening either. So I sat with that till 10 a.m. And I could promise you, if I had access to a firearm, I would not be with you today. So I'm not saying anything about the person with the concealed permit. And we've heard the instances of someone leaving the weapon. It took me almost 20 years, 2 decades. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor. But how many West Virginians, how many out-of-state students, how many students from other countries will be able to survive Senate Bill 10? Mr. Speaker, I am a proud no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Is there other debate on the bill? The gentleman, the 100th, Rittenhour.
In 1996, after 5 years of being beaten into the ground in tactical units in the Marine Corps, I was transferred to Hawaii. I had a pretty good gig that was going to go on. I was going to get to go to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, do POW MIA liaison activities. Instead, Khobar Towers was bombed. Most of you don't remember that. We lost a large number of Air Force personnel when the Iranians destroyed the barracks. So I was brought back into anti-terrorism. I'd done a little bit of it beforehand, so I refamiliarized myself with it. And I spent the next 3 years working on anti-terrorism operations, and it's mainly defensive operations. It's not offensive. I did that later. As I did that, I was training people. So I would train potential victims, individuals in other countries, U.S. personnel, DOD personnel. So one of the things we taught them was if you have a defensive capability, have it with you. If you can harden your facility, harden your area, make sure people understand that you are able to resist, to counter any kind of an attack. If you are, the terrorists will generally not want to hit you. They'll not go after you, they'll go after other targets. So after 9/11, and I won't go into that, after 9/11, I was brought onto a counterintelligence organization, a new organization, to stand up their counterterrorism effort. So as part of that, we developed a model of terrorism. It's still used today in DOD. It was a very comprehensive study of what we did, of terrorism and how we could potentially interact and neutralize that terrorist operations, those types of terrorist operations before they occurred. One of the things we determined early, after looking at hundreds of terrorist attacks, including school shootings, was that a terrorist organization is principally an intelligence organization. Everything it does requires intelligence. So it has to study all of its targets. It has to use intelligence to protect itself. So intelligence is absolutely critical. One of the things we determined is that a terrorist organization using its intelligence apparatus is going to determine first, foremost, and always, prior to doing an operation, whether or not that target is hard. And by hard, I mean whether or not there's going to be resistance encountered, either passive defensive systems or active defensive systems. If they're active defensive systems, they almost never will attack that unless the target is so valuable that they feel they have to go after it, okay? One of the most important active defensive systems beyond a security force is whether or not those individuals within that compound or within that target are in fact armed themselves. If they are armed, the terrorists do not want to attack that target because they're probably going to be annihilated before they get an opportunity to achieve any of their objectives. I'm just sharing that because what's going to happen, and we studied school shootings. The people who do these school shootings do intelligence. School shootings are terrorism. That's exactly what they are. Okay, they do the same type of intelligence collection, analysis, targeting, and weaponeering that the terrorists would do. So if you have a hardened facility, in other words, if you have people who are able to defend themselves, then the chances of somebody trying to do a school shooting, trying to do a terrorist operation, is going to be vastly reduced. So I just thought I'd share that with everyone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there debate on the bill? If not, does the gentleman from the 55th wish to close debate on the bill? Okay, if not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 84 ayes, 13 nays, and 3 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 10, Campus Self-Defense Act.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Gentleman from the 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill take effect from its passage.
The question is on the motion that the bill take effect from passage. Those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 84 ayes, 13 nays, 3 members absent, 2/3 of the members voting in the affirmative. Chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Clerk will please report the next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2283, relating to authorized expenditures of revenues from certain state funds for fire departments.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? Objection is heard. Gentleman from the 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I move.
Sorry. The clerk will please read the bill a third time. House Bill 2283. Yeah, clerk will please read the bill.
A bill to amend and reenact 815-8B of the Code of West Virginia 1931's amendment relating to authorized expenditures of revenues from certain state funds for fire departments, clarifying expanding categories of allowable expenditures, permitting state grant funds to be deposited into a state account and be transferred from the account for unrestricted use, and setting forth a 60-day time frame for fire departments receiving grant funds to transfer unrestricted funds from a restricted account. Be it enacted by the Legislature of West Virginia. Article 15, firefighting, fire companies and departments, civil service for paid fire departments. 815-8B, authorized expenditures of revenues from the Municipal Pensions and Protection Fund and the Fire Protection Fund, deductions for unauthorized expenditures, record retention. A, money received from state for volunteer and part volunteer fire companies and departments pursuant to 33-314D, 33-33, and 33-12C7 of this code shall be deposited into a bank account dedicated to state received funds and may not be commingled with monies received from any source other than the state. Distribution from the Municipal Pensions and Protection Fund and the Fire Protection Fund allocated volunteer or part volunteer fire companies and departments may be expended only for the following. 1, personal protective equipment including helmet, bunker coats, pants, boots, gloves, or a combination of bunker pants and boots, coats, and gloves. 2, equipment for compliance with the National Fire Protection Standard Automotive Fire Apparatus NFPA-1901. 3, compliance with Insurance Service Office recommendation related to fire departments. 4, rescue equipment, communications equipment, and ambulance equipment, provided that no monies received from the Municipal Pensions and Protection Fund or the Fire Protection Fund may be used for equipment for personal vehicles owned or operated by volunteer or part volunteer fire company or department members. 5, the direct costs incurred due to the purchase of land, the construction of new facilities, or the expansion of current facilities when these costs can be demonstrated by the department to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of the fire protection services, as well as maintenance required to maintain the functionality of physical facilities of the department. 6, retirement of debts, but only if the debts were included exclusively for the purchases of the goods and services allowed under this subsection. 7, payment of utility bills, including internet and telephone bills, which may include cell phones when the cell phone is used for fire department related work only. 8, payment of the cost of immunizations, including any laboratory work incident to the immunizations for firefighters against hepatitis B and other bloodborne pathogens. Purchased through the state immunization program or lowest cost bidder, and B, no cost or low cost administration from local boards of health or other similar programs are unavailable. 9, insurance policies including A, property casualty insurance premiums for protection and indemnification against loss or damage or liability. B, life insurance premiums to provide a benefit not to exceed $20,000 for firefighters. C, accident and sickness insurance premiums which may be offered to cover individual members of volunteer or part volunteer fire companies, semi or. D, umbrella policies that contain various types of insurance policies to protect against loss and liability so long as life insurance premiums and the amounts prescribed above and property and casualty insurance are part of any umbrella policy. 10, operating expenses reasonably required in the normal course of providing effective and efficient fire protection services, which include but not limited to gasoline, bank fees, postage, and accounting costs. 11, dues paid to national, state, and county associations. 12, workers' compensation premiums. 13, education, training, supplies, and fire prevention professional materials not to exceed $500 per year. And 14, food, bottled water, and food-related items like disposable plates and utensils to provide necessary meals and water to a fire company when responding to an emergency and is in no way connected to any fundraising events. B, if a volunteer or part-volunteer fire company or department uses any amount of money received from the Municipal Pensions Protection Fund or the Fire Protection Fund for an item, service, or purpose not authorized by this section, that amount, when determined, an official audit, review, or investigation shall be deducted from the future distribution to the volunteer fire company or part-volunteer fire department. C, if a volunteer or part-volunteer fire company department purchases goods or services authorized by this section, but then returns the goods or cancels the services for a refund, then any money refunded shall be deposited back into the same dedicated bank account used for the deposit of distribution of the Municipal Pensions and Protection Fund and the Fire Protection Fund. D, a volunteer or part-volunteer fire company or department shall have a dedicated bank account for all funds received from the Municipal Pensions Protection Fund, the Fire Protection Fund, and any other state distribution, including state grant money. 1, any distribution received from the Municipal Pension Protection Fund for the Fire Protection Fund shall remain in the bank account dedicated to receiving state funds and be used in accordance with this section. 2, all other monies, including state grants, must be transferred out of the account used to receive state funds transferred to another bank account within 60 days of receipt, and such transfer must be in the exact amount of the deposit. If any money is received from source other than the Municipal Pensions and Fire Protection Fund or Fire Protection Fund and is not transferred to another account within 60 days, the money may not only be used in accordance with this section. E, each volunteer or part-volunteer fire company and department shall retain for 5 calendar years all invoices, receipt, and payments records for the goods and services paid with money received from the state for volunteer and part-volunteer fire companies and departments pursuant to 33.314D, 33.333, and 33.12C7 of this code, and money received as a grant from the Fire Service Equipment and Training Funds provided in 29-3-5F of this code. F, volunteer and part-volunteer fire companies and departments may also invest or receive monies described in subsection A of this section and collect interest thereon, provided that volunteer and part-volunteer fire companies and departments shall not commingle the monies received, the received monies with funds received from any other source, shall not be the invested money as collateral or security for any loan, and shall retain all resulting statements of accounts and earnings for a minimum of 5 years from the date of these statements.
Okay, the question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman to the 12th, Delegate Chris.
Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
Is there further debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 89 ayes, 0 nays, and 11 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2283, relating to authorized expenditures of revenues from certain state funds for fire departments.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Gentleman from the 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I move, subject to announcements, that the House stay in recess until 8 p.m.
Are there announcements? Are there announcements? Gentleman from the 96th.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Rules will meet at 7:45 p.m. in the back of the chamber.
Gentleman from the 12th, Delegate Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet at 4 o'clock or 30 minutes after the previous committee meets in Finance Committee.
Gentleman from the 99th, Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Economic Development and Tourism will meet at 2 o'clock in the House Finance Room. Republican members will caucus at 1:45.
Gentleman from the 21st, Delegate Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet at 2 p.m. today in the House Education Committee Room. Republican members will caucus at 1:45.
Gentleman from the 85th, Delegate Hott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Banking and Insurance will meet Thursday, February the 23rd at 9:15 in House Judiciary. The agenda will be posted. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 95th, Doug Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if I'm quite in order here or not. I would ask to suspend the rules so that, and ask for the comments from my colleague from the 46th be recorded in the journal.
Okay, the gentleman would have to ask for his own comments to be recorded.
I'm sorry?
The gentleman would have to make his, pursuant to the rule adopted by the House, the gentleman would have to ask for his own comments to be recorded.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman from the 72nd, Doug Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Volunteer Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services will meet at 9:15 a.m. Wednesday morning in the House Finance Committee room. Republicans will caucus at 9 a.m. The agenda has been posted.
Gentleman from the 98th, Doug Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those who are observing Ash Wednesday tomorrow, the Very Reverend Donald Higgs, rector of the Basilica of the Co-Cathedral of the Sacred Heart here in Charleston, will be dispensing ashes in the Speaker Pro Temporary's office, room 246M, from 10 to 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm also advised that Father Thomas Caliparico of St. Anthony's Catholic Church will be dispensing ashes in the Senate Clerk's Conference Room, which is room 215M, also from 10 to 11 a.m. tomorrow. So again, for those wishing to observe Ash Wednesday, you'll be able to receive ashes on both the House and the Senate side from 10 to 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman the 43rd, Doug Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the House Education Committee room. The agenda has been posted. Additionally, Republican members will caucus today at 3 p.m. in the Chairman's office.
Gentleman from the 1st, Doug McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet tomorrow afternoon at 3:45. Republicans will caucus in the chair's office at 3:30.
Gentleman from the 51st, Doug Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet today at 4 p.m. in the committee meeting room. The agenda is posted. In addition, the Republicans will caucus at 3:45 in the Chairman's office.
Gentleman from the 91st, Doug Forst.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your subcommittee on political subdivisions will not meet tomorrow.
Gentleman from the 47th, Doug Longacre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committees on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security will meet tomorrow in the East Wing Committee Room at 9:30 a.m.
Are there further announcements at this time? Okay, if not, the questions on the motion at the House recess until 8 p.m. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. We are in recess until 8.
Good job, Bobby.
Nowhere. Jared Hunt just texted me, Ian's Day is shot, thoughts and prayers. And I said, Jared, why do you think I have plans to go to Carnival otherwise? Every day is shot until March 12th.
That's exactly right. And he knows that.